Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin Tatro and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Teachers Talkin'. As always, I am Dustin, and today I am here with my co-host Ghazali, and it is just going to be the two of us today, which we're excited to do that and get away from doing things with guests for an episode. So today we're going to talk about something that really matters a lot to both of us, and that's talking about just a challenge that not only impacts Ghazali and I, but just impacts educators at every single level, and that is burnout. And so today our episode is titled Boundaries and Balance, Practical Solutions for Teacher Burnout. We're going to use an overarching question of how can teachers and leaders create sustainable balance and prevent burnout in education. And so throughout today's discussion, we're really going to be doing our best to share practical strategies that come directly from my brand new free Teacher Boundary and Balance workbook that is designed to support you in setting sustainable boundaries. And so to kick us off, we're going to reflect on where burnout starts and how we can recognize it early. So Ghazali, it's good to be back with you as always. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about why it's so important for teachers to recognize burnout before it starts to become overwhelming?
Hi, Dustin. It's great to be with you again. And finally, it's just the two of us. So we get to chit chat and chill a little bit more for this episode, which I kind of like a lot. All right. So basically, why teacher burnout recognition matters is because, for me anyway, recognizing teacher burnout before it becomes overwhelming is crucial for protecting both educators and their students, because when burnout goes unaddressed, right, it doesn't really just affect the teacher's well-being. It can snowball and cascade into the classroom. So it may affect things like classroom quality, student relationships, and ultimately even educational outcomes. So you can see that if you do not address this issue early, it can really explode into something much bigger. So for early recognition of burnout, it allows for intervention at stages where the recovery is simpler and faster. Because I've read research which states that the earlier you address the burnout, the higher the likelihood that you can allay it or solve the issue. But if you wait for too long, it can become something worse, like, for example, anxiety or depression, so then it will take much longer to heal. So like many health conditions, right, burnout is progressive. If you catch it early, it means that the teacher can implement certain self-care strategies and boundary setting before reaching complete exhaustion and developing long-term health problems. And the education system itself benefits when burnout is addressed promptly, because schools with lower burnout rates typically report better staff retention, which reduces your cost of hiring and hiring cycles and maintains institutional knowledge base. More importantly, students benefit from consistent relationships with teachers who are emotionally available and passionate about their work. Yeah, so I guess that those are the important things about recognizing burnout.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because burnout sometimes can be really difficult to recognize. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like, it is much better when you can recognize it early. But like, I know for me personally, I did not recognize it early. I did not know what the signs of burnout were to be able to like catch it
Same
and
here.
start doing something about it, right? And that's partially why I was really excited to talk about this topic today. It's also why I spent so much time building out this workbook to help educators, because it's like, as a veteran educator, it took me
Awesome.
way too many years into my career to recognize that I needed better balance, better boundaries, and that I was starting to burn out. So with that being said, when you think about it, what are some of the subtle signs, or what are some of the ways that we can recognize that we're starting to slip, or that we're starting to burn out?
That's a really good question, Dustin. Yeah, I mean, I faced the situation too many years ago, and it just hit you. Sometimes as a teacher, it just hits you one day, and you just feel like you can't get out of bed. Yeah, by then it's too late. So for me, in my personal situation, what I found was there's this increasing work hours, uh, which blend one into the other. It's like when you get to school and you have this feeling, I'm here again. I thought I just left for home. So it's like time, you don't get that sense of time anymore. Time
Mhm.
just moves so fast. Yeah. And these are some of the warning signs lah. So you have increasing work hours without recognition. This can cause the burnout, where you have to stay later each day or bring home more and more work, and do work during the weekends. So that's a subtle sign, one of the subtle signs. Another one is difficulty in saying no to additional
Mhm.
responsibilities. Yeah, so I used to be a yes man, because
Mhm.
I felt that I can't bear to say no to my colleagues, and at the same time I can't say no to my bosses, because if I do that, it's going to impact my promotion. What will they think of me? I'm not a team player. Yeah,
Yep.
so no was something very difficult to say for me personally. Yeah. Then as a result, this is the third thing, I faced decreased personal time. So I had less lunch breaks. I had to skip my lunch breaks, either to help students, or um, I had to cancel personal plans to complete school-related tasks. Yeah, so that was another sign of burning out. And all this manifested into physical symptoms. I had headaches, and what they call tension headaches, headaches caused by
Mhm.
stress. I had disrupted sleep, waking up many times at night, digestive issues, bloating, burping, and all those other related symptoms, which seem to worsen during the work week. Yeah. And because of this, it led to a manifestation of like emotional distancing,
Mm.
where I felt detached from students or colleagues whom I previously enjoyed interacting with. So I distanced from them. I didn't have this joy in teaching anymore, which I would say a reduced enthusiasm for my lessons that once brought joy, and now it feels like an obligation to get through. And of course, I started being more cynical about the job, about educational initiatives, or about school leadership, or even people who were being nice to me that I felt, no, they're just being a hypocrite, or so
Mhm.
things took on a negative tone. Basically, I was neglecting my basic self-care routines like exercise, healthy eating, even hobbies. I didn't have any. Yeah, so those are the signs that I was headed towards a place of darkness. And then when I fell sick, then I went to see the doctor. I realized my blood pressure was up. I was getting gout. I had kidney stone attacks.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's not a good thing. Yeah, it's not a good thing. But the positive thing is that when I started going into things like positive psychology, meditation, doing things that I enjoy, saying no to the things that I didn't like to do, and doing more of the things that I enjoyed in teaching, in my work, um, things improved. Yeah, I got my health back, I got my life back, and I got the enjoyment of teaching back. So that's the positive thing that I would say lah, that it's not like a totally downhill all the way, and then you're headed to destruction. No, you can actually find things that can make you feel a lot better in the work that you do. Yeah.
And I'd say too, like having these issues or starting to find that burnout, it's not like it's a one-time thing. Like it comes in waves. And so, yeah, for me, I loved everything that I was doing, and the burnout came on slowly over time. And for me, it was also very much about being a yes man, wanting to please people, wanting to be a good team member. And I felt bad ever saying no to anything. And I think that a lot of that is where my burnout began, and it just was compiling. But even once I did realize that I was burning out and did something about it, because mine also manifested in physical things like not being able to sleep and headaches and not looking forward to going to work and bloating in gas. And I experienced a lot of that same stuff. And the interesting thing is that even once I figured that out and did something about it and improved it, sometimes we still allow that to slip. And it can happen over and over again. And I think the biggest thing is having strategies and knowing what works for you, and recognizing, hey, I'm burning out, and doing something about that. And second, hey, I'm burning out again. I've let my boundaries slip. I've let my balance slip. But seeing that, and a lot of times you could recognize that a lot faster because you've recognized that burnout once before. And then it's about, what am I not doing for myself that I was, to help me get back to some level of balance, right? And for sure in my workbook, I list a whole bunch of signs to look for to see, are you burning out? And then also to offer ways to cope with that. And so again, that's one of the things that I thought was really important about building out this workbook for people, was to address these types of things. And so it's so fun to see that a lot of the things that I mentioned in that workbook are also things that you're bringing up right here, because they're very real.
I'm glad you came up with this workbook, and it's something that is very much needed and necessary in our profession. And I think you also in your workbook discuss things like setting boundaries without guilt, right? So why do many teachers feel guilty setting boundaries, and how can they start to shift that mindset?
Well, I mean, you already started kind of touching on that. It starts with, as teachers, like, we go into this profession because we want to help and serve other people. That's what being an educator is all about. It's a service industry. And so we're there to serve a school community, to serve a group of students, to serve their families, to serve the people that we work with, and to serve the local community that school is a part of. And so it's hard to say no to a bunch of things, no matter what it is, when you feel like you're supposed to be serving that community. And I think that's where the guilt starts to creep in. We feel like we are supposed to do things. We feel like we are, if we're asked to do an extra task, we feel like we're supposed to do that thing. If we didn't finish work during the work hours, we feel like we have to take that thing home, or that we have to plan on the weekends. We feel like we have to answer that email that comes in at 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and the truth here is that while we feel that way, we have to remember that we are not beholden to anybody else, especially work. And I've had that battle for many years. I would talk with my dad about my stress, about the drama and the trauma that was coming from school. And my dad would always just tell me, like, well, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to think that way. You should take time off. And I'm like, it's not easy to take time off as a teacher. Like, you don't understand, right? Like, I'm the only educator in my family. And so I felt like nobody else understood the stress that I was put under as an educator, because I'm like, look, I am here to serve all these people. And if I am not here to serve these people, then what am I doing, right? But ultimately, I had to realize that as much as we don't want to say it, school is just a business like every other business. And the thing is, and what makes it hard and what leads to that guilt, I think, is that it's a business of people. It's not just a business of things. And when you're talking about it being a business of people, and you're somebody who cares about people and has empathy and sympathy, that weighs on you a lot more. And so I think that's why we feel so guilty about saying no. We feel guilty when we set boundaries. We feel guilty when we don't go the extra mile. But also, those are all the things that ultimately are going to lead to burnout in the end anyways.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Maybe we can dive deeper or zero in on this idea of setting boundaries. Can you give an example of like what's one small boundary a teacher could set this week that could immediately support their well-being? Something that's tangible and immediate and powerful.
The very first thing that I did when I like really hit a wall and I like snapped on somebody at work, it's like one of my most unprofessional moments. And I knew that like within minutes of it happening. But that was the tipping point for me in which I knew that things were not right. And I should have seen other signs coming along the way that I did not, which is again why I thought this episode was so important to talk to people about, because I did not see the signs. And one day I just lost it and just like blew up. So what I would say is when that happened to me, one of the first things that I did that evening was I started by turning off any type of notifications on my devices that were related to work. It didn't even take me long, within maybe an hour having done that, I was like, notifications alone is not going to keep me from like jumping on and checking to see if I got this email back, or, making sure that someone hasn't messaged me on Remind or something like that. Right. And so, but I was also like home. And so I said, why am I worrying about this? These are the things that are giving me stress and anxiety. And so not only did I remove those or stop those notifications, I actually took all work-related things off my phone. So I removed my work email so that I couldn't check it. I removed any sort of teaching, communicating apps, anything that was related to school. I took it off of my phone, because my phone was the device that was with me all of the time. So I could go to a baseball game, and if my phone dings and I see I have an email, like I can't help myself but to check that notification. And I know that's where a lot of people are. And I would have people, I'd be out with people and they'd be like, you're not supposed to be working. But that's what I was doing, even though it was unintentional. I'd be on vacations checking. I'd be at ball games checking. I'd be at a concert in between bands checking, right? Like I was constantly checking. And the only way for me to prevent myself from checking, to create that self-discipline, was to be like, get it away. And so I would say that's just like such a teeny tiny thing, but it's also so important, because as teachers, we want to be so responsive. But if you don't have work email and you don't have work notifications on your phone, then you're not getting notified that there's work and you can stay away from it. So to me, I would say that is probably the easiest and first step that anybody could take to start to set a boundary like right now.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. For me, it's about setting boundaries every day. So I set aside an hour a day. I try to find time an hour a day, whenever it may be, whether it could be even during school time when I have a break and I have a few periods of break. Then if it's an hour, it's my time. It could be after work at home, around dinner time. That's my time. Where you can do things like go for a walk, or do some meditation, or do yoga or stretching or something, that helps you calm down, and it's your own personal time. So it's your own protected personal time where you don't let anything disturb your peace. Yeah. So I think that's definitely very good advice.
And I think that works differently for different people, right? Like you have to know
Yep.
what are the things that like give me peace, give me joy,
Yeah.
etc. And I don't even say, I love that you're saying like you make sure that you have an hour every day. I love that. I would take that one step further, and I do personally. I actually schedule that time. So I'm very
Yeah.
big on like creating a schedule for myself every week. I'm just very structured in that way. I need it, and I don't thrive well if I don't have a very set structure. But I don't only set that structure for work related things. I plug in all my personal things too. So I make sure to schedule time to work out. I schedule time that I'm going to go to this party. I schedule time of, making and having dinner. I schedule time with my family, etc. And I think that's another part here is it's like, it's easy. And depending on who you are, right? Some people have the self-discipline to just be like, oh, I haven't had my hour to myself today. I need to make sure I get that in, and they can. And other people like me, if it's not on my schedule, I might not get to it. I might not do it. I might forget about it. But I'm pretty good about like sticking to my schedule. So if I have the time built in, then I see it and I'm like, oh, it's time to go do this thing, which means I have to stop doing whatever it is I'm doing and go do that thing. So I think, right now we're talking a lot about what we can do as individuals. And there's a lot that we can do as individuals. I think the most, in order to really truly create balance and boundaries, most of that work is on us as individuals. However, there's also a side of things in which, in order for us to create some boundaries and in order for us to protect ourselves and our peace in some ways, we also need the leaders at our schools to play a role. So when you think about that, what role do school coaches, mentors, leaders, principals, assistant principals, what role do they play in helping teachers to protect their time and energy?
Wow, that's really, really important. So this is where you need to make sure that, I mean, you go to a school, you'll be very, very lucky if you can be in a school where the leaders are really mindful about supporting teacher well-being. So, and how do you tell if the leader is supporting your mental well-being or your basically physical well-being as well? You look for effective school leaders that create structures that protect your time. That's one of the things that you look out for. So what they will do typically is they would set clear expectations about boundaries. So you don't have to, really work too hard to find your own free time. They are the ones who really, really set the boundaries. They make clear rules, regulations. For example, no parents calling you after 5 p.m. Or do not have to entertain any parents who call you after 5 p.m. You do not have to entertain any students who message you asking for help after a certain time. Yeah. So they really, really stick to the official work hours. So they don't expect you to do anything beyond those work hours. Those are your own time for you to manage on your own. So that's first thing. Second thing is you need to see whether they are modeling healthy work habits themselves. So if they are pushing themselves all the time, then they are not really modeling those well-being approaches for school leaders, right? So they must be able to model and they must show you how healthy work habits look like. And it really, really helps if you see them preparing programs or activities that the staff can get involved in. And at the same time, these are activities which helps you with your mental well-being. Like again, they schedule sessions for yoga, Pilates, even art therapy for the staff, yeah, and bonding time between the staff and students. For example, the staff and student breakfast. So some schools do that. Yeah. So those are things that that the school leaders can do to give time and help the teachers practice well-being. Then, of course, they can also provide targeted professional development on time management, self-care, yeah, how to manage their time better. Because I can tell you, some teachers, we we are so in tune to the pedagogical aspects of our profession that we do not really look into the things which are important also in terms of personal development uh, in the realm of personal well-being. Yeah, so that's where we need to maybe get some guidance from the school leaders. And I think basically if they are defending the teacher planning time and then avoiding unnecessary meetings so that teachers can do these important things and get it out of the way, those really go a long way to help teachers get a bigger perspective about their own mental health and well-being. Yeah. And of
And
course, if you're a coach, it is also something that's very important to to support your staff by having staff who are trained to be coaches.
Yeah, that's super important too. A couple things I'm thinking about with what you said too is one of the things we have to be careful of is leaders who, there's a lot of leaders out there who like to say that you should protect your time and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But then the leaders don't go with that. So for example, I have had leaders who have said, you shouldn't be checking your email after X time. But then that leader sends an email out after X time. And a lot of times they'll say like maybe that'll be a scheduled email, like a something they sound out every week or something, right? And they'll go, you don't have to read that when it gets sent out. Just, make sure that you do read it. But then they turn around and have a meeting before the start of school day, the very next day. And they're like, I don't know if you've read this email yet or not. It's 7:15 in the morning. Of course, I haven't read the email that you sent out at 10 o'clock last night. And you have told me that I shouldn't read that email. And now you're asking me about it 9 hours later? I'm barely here yet, right? And so I think that's something we also have to be cautious of, is these leaders who sort of falsely promote balance and well-being, but then don't model it and don't actually push it. On the contrary to that is when you are sending out weekly emails as a leader, it should be a consistent day and a consistent time. That time should never be outside of hours in which you expect a teacher to read it. So if you're going to send it out, at least, even if you are going to send it, let's just say 6 p.m. every Sunday night or whatever, and your expectation is simply make sure that you've had that read, sometime before the end of the day, Monday, because that email contains things you need to know about the week. I'm okay with that. I'll read it on my prep time during Monday, right? And as long as I have that 24 hours or whatever to get to it, I think that's great. Also, leaders who can see burnout happening, who push you, promote, and sometimes even force you to take a day off. So I have had leaders who are like, you haven't had a day off in a long time. You need to take one. And I expect for you to take one in the next 2 weeks. So give me a day. And if you don't, I'm going to give you a day. And I think I've had a couple of leaders who have been like that, where they push everyone on their staff to take care of themselves. And those are absolutely, like you said, people who model their expectations of balance and boundaries. The people who model that tend to be some of the best leaders, because they hold true to the other things that I'm saying here. They're the people who don't send late night emails. They schedule emails for the next day. They're the people who give you a time frame in which to, read things like that or do certain things, versus last minute things, or saying not to do something, but then doing it themselves. And so, I think that those are also really, really important aspects of all of this. And so with that being said, what would you say a culture of balance actually looks like in a healthy school environment?
Oh, certainly, what you have just mentioned. The meetings must have a clear start and end times, and it is strictly adhered to. That's a good culture to have. Emails aren't expected to be answered or read during the evenings or weekends, and especially a big one for me is that my planning periods are protected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because but I understand sometimes it just can't be avoided. You know, I have a free period and I've already set aside that will be the time I'm going to use to prepare for my subsequent lessons. And then suddenly I get a notice, or you have to cover for another staff, another teacher who's sick. Then you have to go to her class, or his class, and cover the lesson. That there goes my free period,
Mm-hmm.
and that really stresses me out, because how am I going to find the time to plan for my next lessons?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a big bugbear for me. But I guess sometimes you just have to get through it, and these days with AI, it can be done. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you on that note specifically too, something that I made sure to add in the workbook, and I actually have a supplemental resource as well called Quick Scripts for Balance. But there are scripts in my free workbook and the supplemental, and some of those scripts are designed for exactly what you just said. Look, it's inevitable that we're going to lose our planning period now and again. And I understand that. But the question really becomes, how are you going to give me that time back? And so if I need to be a team player and go help cover a class because somebody is absent and sick that day, I totally get it. Now, if that is a normal thing that's happening every single day, then the school leadership needs to do something different, right? Because you can't be expecting your teachers to give up their planning time every single day. And I've been in that situation for sure. And it's extremely frustrating. But also having ways of responding back to your leaders to protect yourself. And that's partially why I created those scripts, was so that you could have something that you could go right back to your leader and go, hey, no problem. But also, when am I going to get this time back? How are you now going to protect my time, since I am giving up my time to help you, right? It's got to go both ways. And that also makes me think back to, you were talking about leaders doing things like yoga practices and things like that. Personally, if that's something we're doing as a school community, I've talked in the past about being part of a school where we meditated twice a day, but it was a school-wide meditation, right? I am all for that. But if you are going to have me go do yoga during quote unquote professional development time, I would rather that you're protecting my planning. I do not want to do those types of activities during my contracted hours. That should be something that should be optional for me if I feel like I need it. But what most teachers need is more time. So what you said, being purposeful about like professional development time and things like that, I think offering people different avenues of things like yoga, meditation, etc., are fantastic. But if you're trying to force that down your staff's throat, then you're defeating the purpose of creating that balance as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, I agree. Yeah. Another important thing, another aspect of culture is, I think that a really good school should celebrate the whole person or the whole people, in the sense that the school recognizes that teachers also have families. Teachers have hobbies and they have needs outside of work, and the school creates policies that honor these realities. So you could have your eat with your family day, like what they have over here. Yeah, and those times are really strictly set aside, and you just let the teachers, okay, today you go off earlier. We won't schedule any meetings, any activities, any co-curricular activities or remedials for the students, because you need to spend time with your family. And we call it the Eat with Your Family Day. Yeah, so that's something that that can be institutionalized or made into a culture. Yep, and become a practical support system for the school to help its staff. Do you have anything interesting like that before in your school, Dustin?
Not quite to that level. I love that. I think that's so cool that you do that. I have been at places where they had specific days planned throughout the calendar year where there wouldn't be students in the afternoon, which were meant to be like teacher plan afternoons. The problem I think that we ran into with that was that then the expectation became, yeah, there's no students and we're telling you to do what you need to do, but also you can't leave campus. So you can't go with your colleagues to a coffee shop and do some work, or you can't leave and go home to do the work because that's where you focus best. Or, you know what, since students aren't here, we're gonna throw this hour-long PD in on the afternoon. And so sometimes that time was helpful. I think the like idea of it was the right idea, but the execution fell pretty flat, because if I was a teacher who was pretty planned up and maybe I was caught up on my things, what would have been best for me would have been to go home for the afternoon and go enjoy my day, right? While somebody else might be like, wow, I'm so happy I have this extra 3 hours that I can catch up on my planning and my grading, etc. And some people thrive staying in their classroom and being able to work, while other people get distracted staying in their classroom. I was one of those people, like because that was leading to conversation and socializing with my colleagues, which sometimes then distracted me from the work that I needed to do. And I would have been more productive leaving the building and going somewhere else where I wasn't going to get distracted in that way, right? But we're all a little different in that aspect. And so I wish a day like that was catered to the fact that we all work in little different ways and be a little bit more open and flexible. So I love that idea. I would have done the execution a little bit differently. But man, I love that like, hey, this is a eat with your family. Like, we're done for today. School is shut down. Kids are gone. Like, the day is over. You're not expected to do anything. You're not going to get any emails. Like, go and enjoy your day with your family. I just think that's lovely.
Yeah, that's awesome. But even like with all these things in place, right? And even with the teachers' own planning, setting aside that time for themselves, how teaching can be. It's very seasonal in the sense that when it comes to the exam period, there's a lot of setting of papers, marking of scripts, preparing students for the exams, and even with your best intentions, right, your boundaries just slip, So, what's your advice? What are some practical first steps a teacher can take to reset back to their, to achieve their center, so to speak?
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, where we said, balance can come in waves. You can realize that you are burned out, and you can set things in place for yourself to create that balance and those boundaries. But inevitably, times come in which we allow those to slip. And so what do? I think first it starts with, you like lists, Ghazali. So Ghazali is my secret sauce. Here's my
All
list
right,
of
let's
ways
have
that
it.
you can reset. Okay.
Yeah, man.
So
Let's go.
step one, I think, is to start by identifying what's actually causing the slippage, right? What boundary has been hardest to maintain, or what boundary is it that you have let slip, or what specific event or habit led to that boundary slipping. So for example, if you've started answering late night emails again, because you started feeling guilty about not responding quickly enough, right? Like, recognizing that that's the core problem here. Step two then is to set one immediate action in order to regain your control. So thinking through, like, what's one small change that I can make today to begin to reestablish that boundary that I have now let slip. And so with this email example, you might set an auto response that like informs parents or informs your community that you only respond during work hours, right? And so that can be an auto notification that can be set so that it's used from, let's just say 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next day, Monday through Thursday. And then it can be on for Friday, 5 p.m. all the way till Monday, 8 a.m., right? So that anybody who emails you gets that notification that you don't check emails outside of work hours. I think step 3 then is to adjust your strategies. Thinking through what support or what tools can you use to reinforce your boundary. If you need to communicate your boundary more clearly to other people, like reminding your colleagues that your planning period is your time for lesson prep and not for meetings. And then I think the last step really is to then check in with yourself. When are you going to reassess your progress? What does success look like? How, and really making sure that you have followed through. So again, my steps are: 1, identify what's causing the slip; 2, set an immediate action to regain control; 3, adjust your strategies; and 4, schedule a check-in with yourself to make sure that you are living up to your expectations, your own expectations.
Wow, yeah, that's very comprehensive. Can you elaborate a bit further about the last section where how can teachers build in simple check-ins to catch burnout before it spirals? Because I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I think, there's different tools that you can use. Personally, I use a method that I call meeting with myself, and I do this weekly, and it kind of serves multiple purposes. For one, I set up my next week's schedule. So I try to do this on Fridays. So ideally, you do this before you leave school on a Friday, and you go into your weekend done and basically planned for your next week. That way, when you leave on Friday, you're not thinking about work until you are back there on Monday morning. No more Sunday scaries. So in my meeting with myself, I map out my next week. And like I said, I'm a scheduler, so that includes mapping out all of the personal things that I need to do as well. It also means creating my to-do list for the week. And so I will create that list. I'm very big on color coding. So I'll put school-wide tasks in one color. I'll put 11th grade tasks in another color, etc. I prioritize my to-do list as well. I put asterisks by all of the top priorities, the things that absolutely must get done during that week. And if they have any specific due date, like if I need to get something done by Tuesday, I also will put that in parentheses next to that task. So it'll have an asterisk and it will have a date. And that way I know how to prioritize my tasks the next week. And part of all of that, like I said, then is also scheduling my boundary times in. So I will write in my calendar a time in which I am quitting for the day. I will literally write the word, and I just did this recently, where I wrote the word quit in all capital letters and a specific block of time in my schedule. And my goal that day was to quit at that time. And so it was funny because I was actually I was all packed up and I was walking out of work and somebody said, "Oh, you're getting out of here pretty quickly today." And I said, "Yeah, I set a boundary today to stop working at 5 o'clock. And he looked at his watch and he said, "Well, it's 5:02. You better get going." And I said, "Am I not walking out the door right now?" I have my backpack on, I'm out of here, right? And so that's how I do my check-ins, because then I do that weekly. I take that list, because a lot of times I don't even complete everything that's on my to-do list by the end of the week, and that's okay too. As long as I've completed all of the high priority items and I got my deadlines done when they needed to be done, there's inevitably going to be things that just don't get done. That is the nature of work. It doesn't even matter whether you're a teacher or whether you work in an office. The nature of work is that there's always work. So there's no reason to take it home when it's going to be there the next day, and it never goes away. So If I get through my week and I haven't completed certain tasks, those tend to become my high priority tasks the following week. So I just shift them from this week to the next week And then I marked those as my top priorities and that's how I kind of roll, by not only creating to-dos for myself and a schedule for myself, but also a forced check-in for myself. And that gives me the opportunity of reflecting on my week, of seeing what worked and what didn't work, and making adjustments for the following week. And by doing this and doing it on a Friday, I then leave work with my whole next week ready to go, and I can go home and I can enjoy my weekend, and I'm not panicking on a Sunday about I'm not ready for Monday, because I made sure I was ready for Monday on Friday.
Yeah, that's great. I especially like your idea of the color coding. Yeah, because you can just look, at a glance. For example, if you color code your high stress items in red, and you color code the things that make you happy and your own personal time in blue, you'll be shocked and surprised to see, how much red your day could contain.
Mm-hmm.
And then that tells you I need to schedule in more blues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do that all the time. I'm like, my personal stuff is in pink. So I'm like, there's not enough pink on my schedule. There's too much of all these other colors. So I need to make sure that I get more pink on here too. Right. And so that's part of that reflection, but it's a constant thing. Like, boundaries and balance it's not just a one-time thing where you sit down one day and you decide I'm going to do these things, right? You have to make sure that you continuously do those things. That's how we take care of our well-being. So I think that kind of just leads us into now talking a little bit more about why it's important that we don't only rely on individual teachers to self-care their way out of burnout, because we're talking a lot about self-care and what we do for ourselves. So how do we go about being with others? How do we rely on other people instead of only relying on ourselves to create balance, to create boundaries, and to prevent or get out of that stage of burnout? How do we rely on other people?
All right, this is the important thing. Before I even mention about how we rely on other people, I want to mention about why it's important to realize that sometimes you can't do things on your own. Especially when it comes to a situation whereby um, it is something that is not within your control as a teacher to do anything about, because it could be a systemic issue, it could be an administrative issue, it could be a leadership issue, which is out of your control. And you can't be doing yoga all the time. All these things come to you and really cause you stress, and you just go yoga. I'll do yoga, because it's not gonna help. Yeah, either you are just trying to put out a big fire, with a small teaspoon of water, because it is something that needs to be dealt with at a more systemic level. Yeah, so that leads into why you need to work with others, because sometimes you have to talk to your school leaders, you have to talk to somebody who can do something about the system, about the institution, about the policy or rules, regulations. You have to talk to them, come to an understanding, let them understand what you are facing as a teacher. What are the challenges you are facing? What are the obstacles you are facing, which actually could be easily solved if only they change certain things about the system or the institution, right? So that's the main thing I want to put across, right? Don't place the burden of systemic problems on individuals. It's not fair, right? And we must not ignore the organizational factors which cause burnout rather than just the individual factor. There are institutional or organizational factors which cause burnout. Yeah, and this creates guilt. When your own personal strategies inevitably fail against such overwhelming odds or overwhelming workloads. So we need to um, see how the institution can help, and that's where you start looking at who are the people within the institution with the power to change things that can help you. Yeah. So especially Dustin, you were school leader at one point. Maybe you can also chime in a bit on this aspect.
When there's absolutely systemic issues, and that's also very different from school to school and location to location, and some leaders are really good about overcoming those systemic issues. I think when we talk about people as individuals and leaning on one another, it starts with understanding what is in your locus of control and what is outside of your locus of control, because those systemic issues are outside of your locus of control. And yes, they're stressors, but the more that we can understand that there's nothing we can do about those things, the more we can keep that stress from like piling on us. But when we talk about leaning on others, I think one, shared experience is important. So when you are dealing with those systemic issues and those are outside of your locus of control, having people who all feel the same, who can lean on one another, is important. And then two, I think having people that you can rely on as accountability partners is also really important. So if I am trying to create more self-discipline, to create better balance and boundaries, who is it that I can lean on, that I can say, hey, I'm trying to do these things. I need you to, one, pay attention if I break from these things, or if it seems as though I'm not doing these things, or to check in on me and ask how those things are going, or even that I would like to set up a time with you where I can check in with you and tell you about how my week went in attempting to do these new things that I'm trying to set up for myself, right? Like just having somebody that you can share that experience with, who can push you, who can cheer you on, who can help you through it and support you through it. I think that goes a long way when we're talking about self-care. So just in a very small example, like if your goal is to be gone from work by 4:00 p.m. every day of a week, having your next door neighbor at, your next door classroom neighbor, or having your best friend at work, or having your coach or your admin come by your classroom at 4:00 and be like, you're supposed to be gone. Why are you still here? Like, or, I see you're packing up to get out. Good job. You held to your own standard today. Little things like that can go a really long way when we're talking about like working together to create those boundaries and fighting that sort of systemic issue at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when we frame teacher burnout as primarily a personal failure requiring more individual resilience, I think we miss addressing the underlying conditions causing widespread exhaustion, because we are losing a lot of teachers in the profession who are burnout. Yeah, so it has to be solved at a systemic level also, not just at an individual level.
So when you think about that, then how do you think that schools or districts or school communities can build better structures to help make sustainability and balance more the norm than the exception?
All right. I think one of the ways definitely is that every school must include teachers in their policy decisions that affect the daily work of teachers. It just amazes me how you could have a school management committee making decisions on behalf of teachers that affect teachers and not ask teachers for input, and you assume that you know what's best for teachers, but that may not be the case, because every teacher has a different reality and how they face things, and even personality and how they approach things. So if you really want to come up with a good policy, you need to get the input from the people that those policies will affect. And in a lot of organizations, this is not the case, because it's always top down, top down, top down. So we need to have a bit of bottom ups approach as well. So that's definitely one of the most important things that a school should do. Um, Secondly is, of course, to implement shared curriculum development and assessment creation to distribute the workload. Oftentimes we have this negative culture where you flock the willing horse, where people who do good work get more work, and those who don't do such good work get less work.
Mm.
So instead, it should be the other way around, and you have those who do good work to mentor those who are not doing such a good work, so to level up their competency. Yeah, so that will definitely help with the burnout situation. And I guess you got to develop clear guidelines about reasonable expectation. What is a reasonable expectations for many things, among them after hours work? What is your reasonable expectation of your teachers for the after hours work? About the grading turnaround, how long do they have to grade a piece of work? And communication response times for parents or for emails from schools, these kind of things. Because sometimes, in fact, I would say many times, the deadline is not the deadline. The deadline that the school set is not the final deadline. The actual deadline is a week before the deadline, because that's when the people start asking for it, for the things. Hey, have you done this? Hey, have you done that? But I thought the deadline is a week later. Yeah, but the other departments have already submitted, so we need to catch up. But the deadline is a week later. So certain people have a strict adherence to, look, I know the deadline is this date. I've structured and planned my workload such that by the deadline I'll get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have management who expect things to be done earlier than the deadline, and that just adds to the unnecessary stress that is totally avoidable. Yeah, so those are among the things that I'm observing lah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that leaders need to probably examine is what expectations do they have for teachers? What policies do they have for teachers that are based around compliance over doing the work and growth? For example, there are so many schools out there that still force teachers to turn in weekly lesson plans. Why? Who's reviewing it? What's the point? Because if I give you my lesson plans for this upcoming week, are you reading it? Or is it just so that you know that I planned? Because if all it is so that you know that I planned, well, that's ridiculous. We're teachers. That's our job. That's what we're there to do. And if we're not planning, we shouldn't be there. And it'll be obvious if you're a leader and you walk into somebody's classroom, which is where you should be as a leader, it should be obvious whether that person is planning or not planning. It shouldn't be because I turned something in. And if I am turning something in, somebody better be reading it and giving me some kind of feedback. But also, if you're giving me feedback on lessons that I've already executed, that's not helpful either. So I just use that as one example, because there are a lot of things that we do as teachers that are mostly done simply for compliance purposes, and that completely defeats the purpose. And those are the kinds of structure that defeat sustainability. So I think that's another thing, is just leaders examining the practices of the school to say, is everything we're doing necessary? And if it is, why? So that you can find the things that are not, and find the things that we need to continue to do because it's about growth, it's about culture, it's about sustainability, versus it's about compliance and I need to know that you're doing your job. If you want to know if I'm doing my job, do yours and walk through my classroom and come and see. And I think that's just another, we could talk all day probably about the types of structures that schools should have to create better well-being, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of it comes down to just the expectations around workload. and around how many classes you have, how many class preps you have, right? So like, are you teaching, because there's schools where teachers literally just teach like one class. And so they might have like 5 different classes of kids, but they teach one subject. It's all English 10, right? But then there's others where people teach English 9 one period, English 10 another period, English 11 another period. They teach psychology another period. So some people are planning to teach 3 and 4 subjects. And I think even about like elementary school teachers, like they're already planning to teach multiple subjects. So like they're not doing their job if they're not doing any planning. There have to be other ways that we can structure to support people than turning in documents.
Agreed. Yep.
So, man, we could probably go on and keep talking about all sorts of different strategies and things. We didn't touch on even a quarter of the things that I have in the Balanced Educator workbook, which is fine.
I think we need another session of this, Dustin. Yeah, we can do another session of this, definitely.
But so before we start to wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts, any final encouragement for educators who are struggling to find balance right now, especially at this time of year, as we're starting to prepare for the end of the school year and going into summer? What can people be doing now to create balance, or what should they be thinking about during their summer break, which is a lot shorter than what most people think it is? What's your final bit of advice and encouragement for people?
Okay, I've thought long and hard about this, and I would just want to say that finding balance as an educator today can be very challenging. Heck, it can even feel impossible sometimes. But you just have to remember that your worth as a teacher isn't measured by the hours that you put in or how many tasks you complete in a day, right? Your true impact comes from the quality of your presence with students, and which requires you to be well, to be mentally healthy, to be at your peak. Yeah, so that's where your true results will show and comes from. And the most inspiring teachers I've known aren't those who sacrifice everything. They are usually the ones who model the healthy boundaries and sustainable passion in the profession. And they show students what it looks like to care deeply while also caring for themselves. That's very important. So take it one step at a time, take small steps. Maybe today it's leaving work half an hour earlier, or protecting one period of planning just for yourself. Perhaps it's connecting with a colleague who understands your challenges. And these seemingly small choices, right, are something that you can start and help you to build a momentum towards lasting change. And that is important, just to start somewhere. And most importantly, you must remember that seeking a balance is not selfish. It's important. It's essential in our profession. Your students need you at your best, not when you are depleted. And the education system desperately needs your voice, your experience, your presence in the classroom. And which these things are lost when burnout forces talented teachers to leave the profession. We don't want that. And the road to balance is not perfect or linear, right? There will be busy seasons, as we've discussed earlier in the podcast. There will be calmer ones as well. So hold on to the conviction that your well-being matters in a system that sometimes can suggest otherwise. But seek those small spaces of calm in the profession to give yourself the space to be well. Right? I think that's very important. Be gentle with yourself.
Give yourself some grace. I always like to say that, like, taking care of yourself, it's very similar to what they'll tell you when you get on an airplane and they're giving you instructions about what happens if there's an emergency, right? And they always tell you, if you're traveling with children, that you have to put your mask on before you put the mask on for your children. Because if you can't save yourself, then you can't save anybody else around you. And that's what I think about well-being as well, right? If you're not protecting your own well-being, then you can't show up as your best for students. And so that is, to me, is the ultimate thing that makes balance so important, is that if you are truly in this profession to serve others, and I believe that every teacher is in this profession to serve others, but you cannot serve others to the best of your ability if you are not taking care of yourself first. So take care of you, give yourself grace, live in those moments of calm and peace, hold on to the conviction, take care of you so that you can take care of others. That's what this is going to all be about in the end. So with that, we're wrapping it up. So to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember that the Balanced Educator workbook is free. It's actually a pay what you want. So it's free, but if you don't mind throwing in $1 or $5, it helps me to continue to create resources like this. So it is a pay what you want, but it's designed to be free. And if you're interested, then you can also download the quick scripts for better balance so that you have, things that are go-tos that you can use to respond to students, to parents, to administrators, to colleagues, etc. Or at least stems that you can use to help you to protect your own balance. And of course, keep listening, subscribe, review the podcast, share the podcast. We're going to continue to do episodes like this so that we can keep supporting educators worldwide. That is what we are here to do. And we will be back with you in 2 more weeks with our next episode. So as always, just thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more supportive conversations.